Hey, everybody, good evening. Welcome to episode 50, the golden episode of the Giant Zone. Tonight it's just your two co-hosts, Steve the Banker,
Going on.
and then you have yours truly, Fly Guy Carl. Um, Glad we're all bringing this to you tonight. We, again, as usual, we appreciate all your support, all the kind words. Please keep spreading the word. Please help us add subscribers, 5-star reviews, whatever you could do to help us grow this for you. We greatly appreciate all your help. Given that, we've got a lot to cover here tonight. But before we do that, we've got to, you can call us a lot of things. And you can make fun of us and you can call us whatever you want. But we are men of our word. So I don't know how many of you followed it during the season. But we did. We ran a contest with our good friends over at the New York Revival, the podcast Pick'em. And the New York Revival won that. So we give them props for that. But as our as our end of the deal, we said that if we lost the bet, we would be wearing New York Revival clothing. And here we are men of our word. So Revival guys, good job. Congratulations. We love working for you and working with you, and we're coming for you next year. So get ready. Steve, anything you want
It's
to
all
add?
love, guys. It's all love, guys. We supported you, and you guys were tremendous supporters of us. We were on each other's shows. You guys do an incredible job. You each bring something different to the table, and this is what podcasting is about. This is why Carl and I got into it. It's about creating not just a community for our show, but a larger community for New York sports. And if we're gonna lose a bet to another show, I'd rather it be nobody else than you guys. You guys are the best. So I wear this proudly tonight. I think, Carl, you feel the same. So it's
I
all good.
do, and I will continue to wear it proudly, at least until we win this, and then I can shed myself of these colors. But that's all right. But guys, again, we love working with you, and good job. And you guys have a great show, and we hope we can continue this partnership going forward. So, given that we got that out of the way, tonight's show is all about the recent NFL draft, which I'm sure you would all be expecting. So we want to come at this a couple different ways. So let's get this going here, Steve. Let's start it off with the front office and the GM. How do you think Shane and the front office and the coaching staff did last weekend?
Bro, this was just another. I mean, we only had a small sample size. We had one draft last year. So I think I speak for a lot of people when I say we thought we knew what he might do, but nobody really knew. And is he going to trade back? And in our last show, for those of you hopefully that watched or listened, we even did percentages. Like, what are the odds that, we had Mitch on, one of our great listeners and watchers, very loyal to the show. We love Mitch. Say hi, Mitch. Hope all's well. And we all ran through that. We said, hey, percentages, trade up, trade down, maybe just stay put and draft best player available. Um, he's as cool as a cucumber. And I think like most of us in life, if you have a job and you think about your best days on the job or your best days playing a sport, it's when you're prepared. He didn't overthink it. I saw on Twitter people arguing, well, he should have traded up, he should have traded down. But listen, we all talk about Howie Roseman maybe being the best GM in football, and if you really look at what he does for the Eagles, he does both. It depends. There has to be the right time to trade up and the right time to trade down, and we've had general managers do a little bit of each in the past, and especially stay put. And it's been questionable, and Shane didn't. And you can tell his preparation. It's like they must have run through every possible scenario, and they talked in their post day one and post day two press conferences, him and Dable, about how they already had potential trades set up. Our prior GMs, I've never heard that, and quite frankly, it was usually a case of they got leapfrogged, they got hoodwinked. Oh, they weren't prepared, and they were afraid to pull a trigger. And he already had trades set up, and even when they weren't sure, he got Dable on the phone calling his relationships in St. Louis. And that's to me, that's humble. That's a GM saying, you know what, I have tons of great relationships, but if it's the coach that has them, let the coach make the call. So all hands on deck. He was prepared for every scenario again. And just another year of drafting guys who they visited and got to know. So I know we'll get more into specifics, but at a high level, the answer to the question for me is it's an unbelievable job again. Letting the draft come to them, showing patience, but also knowing when to be aggressive. How about you, Carl?
Yeah, I agree. He gets an A+ in my book. He handled it so well, and he's got such a poker face. I mean, you see him on TV and you see him in the press conferences, and he's as cool as can be. But he admitted after day one that he was nervous. It got tense, and um, I like that personality trait that no matter what the pressure is on you, you don't overreact. You think your way through it, and he did that. And last year he traded back. He traded back twice in the draft. This year, and he did that because he wanted to add depth. This year he traded up in the draft twice because he wanted to add quality as opposed to depth. And we talked Friday night, Steve, after the day two, and I remember just saying to you, how good does it feel to have a GM that gets it? He knows how to work the draft, and that's exactly what we have. And to your point, Dable was the one that reached out to McVay in Los Angeles and said, "Hey, look, how would you like to do this for that?" Because Dable really wanted Jalen Hyatt, and Schoen let him run with it. And then when Dable presented the trade to him, Shane said, "All right, let's do it." So that to me he's not just a GM, he's a great leader. Leaders let their people do what they're best at, and he trusts them. And that's what makes a good leader even better, is when the people below you do well. So look, he aced it in my book. He just he understands it. It's not too big for him. To your point, he already had trades in line. And he didn't jump until he let the draft come in, like you said. Like I heard reports that they were trying to trade up to get Zay Flowers. Okay, I'm kind of glad they didn't, but all right,
Yes.
that's who they were. It came out later that that's who they were focusing on. I'm happy with where they came out. And you mentioned there were people out there, oh, why did he trade up? But yet everybody was happy with the pick and who the player they got. So you can't have it both ways. So I think he did a great job with it. I think he's going to be the GM here as long as he wants to be. Hopefully that's the same case with Brian Daboll. Wink, Kafka, they may get offers to be head coaches and take those jobs. I understand that, but the nucleus of this leadership seems to be in place, and seems to be going in the right direction. So
Yeah, we weren't going to catch Philadelphia in just one draft, but my God, I know Philadelphia had what seems on paper an amazing draft. Once again, right? I mean, it makes you physically sick. But the fact of the matter is, we're closing the gap. I don't know how measurable it is, but it's getting closer. This again on paper, this seems to be even better than last year. Just unbelievable draft.
I agree. Look, the future is bright. I can't see Philadelphia sustaining this for a long period of time. I think we're going to continue to close that gap on the Eagles. As our youth continues to develop and they continue to add the pieces that they want to this system. And again, Steve, we say this all the time. You can clearly see that they have a system that they're looking to implement, and they're adding the pieces to it. And the pieces don't fit, they have no problem getting rid of them.
Yep.
So I like that. But let's keep going on. So we talked about Shane and the front office. Let's talk about the players they drafted. And I'll start. First round pick Deonte Banks, loved it. Absolutely loved it. You and I were talking during the draft. I also like Joey Porter Jr., but look, to come away with either one of them, I'm not complaining. We probably got the better of the two, and you could tell by Wink's reaction in the draft room when they drafted him. That's the kind of player that Wink wanted. That's the player that Wink wanted. Look, they say he's that stand-up cornerback. They could put him out on an island. He's not going to get beat. He hits, So, all right, so he's not the playmaker. Maybe he doesn't turn or he doesn't get the interceptions. Look, as long as he's not giving up touchdowns, I don't really care. 6 foot 197. He's got good size for a cornerback. 4.35 40. All right, he's got great speed there. And he's going to start. I think he's going to start opening day opposite the Dory Jackson. If you got a first round pick and he's starting right away and he's contributing right away, I'm happy. I no problem there at all. Very quickly, just going through the rest of them. Round 2, you got John Michael Schmitz. Again, good value. You got first round value at pick 57. They didn't have to make a move for it. That fell to them to the point. He's a former wrestler, so he's got balance and he's got that nastiness to him. They say once he locks on to a defender, they can't get him off him. So 6'4", 301. He's being compared, I've seen, to Creed Humphrey of the Chargers, who, by the way, was a Pro Bowler last year. If that's what we've got here, so we've got our starting left tackle, our starting center, and our starting right tackle for the foreseeable future. It's coming together. Third pick, Jalen Hyatt. Again, 5 TDs against Alabama, 67 catches, 1,267 yards, 15 touchdowns last year, 4.4 40. 14 of his catches last year went for 20 yards or more. When was the last time we had that? Okay. And again, now you've got that deep threat over the top receiver that can go after the ball, get underneath the ball. That's a great pick. And that was the pick that Daboll made the trade for. Eric Gray, the running back out of Oklahoma, quickly. Good receiver. He's small in size, but they say he's a physical runner, like he's a violent runner. So, 1,300 yards, 11 TDs last year. Boy, I'm telling you, that's a nice 1-2 punch with Saquon back in the backfield. Trey Hawkins, round 6, cornerback out of ODU. This was a very intriguing pick to me. I think out of all the picks, here's your diamond in the rough right here. And I've heard some pros and cons about him. Here are the stat lines that I like the most about him. 2 interceptions, 3 fumble recoveries, 2 forced fumbles, and a block kick. He's a playmaker. He gets around the ball and he makes plays. 4.4 40. So I'm happy with that pick. Jordan Riley, you got more depth on the defensive line. He doesn't make a lot of plays, but he eats blockers. So if he's going to eat blockers, that means Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams are going to have more clear shots at the running back. You shut down the running game. And then finally, you got Javarius Owens in Houston. To me, developmental pick, maybe special teams. I heard he misses a lot of tackles, so they're going to have to coach him up a little bit. But overall, I'm very happy with what we're bringing home this year. Steve?
So just 3 quick high-level thoughts, and then I'll just add a tiny bit to each one because you did a great job with that breakdown, Carl. We have at least 3 starters. On paper, there should be 3 starters with our first 3 picks: Banks, Schmitz, Hyatt. We also drafted players that are going to increase our team speed all over, but specifically, we have players that are going to also help us on specials. And we've been talking in past shows about how our specials have just been brutal. Love the wide receiver they signed from the Jets in the offseason. He's going to be our gunner. We've been missing a gunner. They've been talking about how that has more of an impact on the punter than any other position on the field. It can really help your punter look a heck of a lot better than they are. So, hopefully a rising tide lifts all ships. Helping our roster team speed will also really help our specials, which if nobody really likes to talk about specials, but listen, it is one of 3 phases for the game. Here's what I'll say. And I said this on Twitter during and after that first pick, Deonte Banks. Listen, he was like my man crush going into the draft. I was like, gosh, he's maybe the 3rd best corner in the draft. People can go back and forth. It's like flavors of ice cream. Do we like Porter? Do we like Banks? There are pros and cons to both. By all accounts, Banks is perhaps the most athletic corner that has ever been measured. And there's some new stats. I don't have it all in front of me. There's a new measurement only been out a few short years, I think. And it takes into account the totality of someone's athleticism, right? So it's not just your 40 time, it's your 40 coupled with your long jump, your high jump, your shuttle, your like your hand size, all these. There has never been a corner more athletic than him with that score. It's like RB1. So I forget what there's some name for it. I don't get too
RAS,
granular with
is it
stats.
the RAS system or something like that, Steve?
I think that might be the test that they take now instead of but something like that. Look, he's a press corner. That's why Wink was so happy. We saw how happy he was. He fits exactly what Wink wants. But there's really four positions in the NFL that are what we call premium. Wide receiver one is, maybe falling out of that. We're starting to see the wide receiver position be devalued a little bit. I think people are realizing you need separation, and it's not always the healthiest thing for your salary cap to go pay 20 some $1 million to a wide receiver. Um, Obviously, quarterback, obviously, left tackle, edge, like a premium edge player is going to be one of your highest paid players on the team, and CB1, and sometimes even a CB2. We saw the Eagles re-sign both their corners. So look, if we hit on this, if the Giants hit on this, I should say, I shouldn't say we, um, that helps the salary cap as well in 2, 3, 4 years. It gives the team tremendous flexibility. Think about our last GM who had to go out, our last two GMs when they signed Jack Rabbit in 2016, Reese and Gettleman when he had to go out and overpay uh, for James Bradbury. You no longer need to do that. Tremendous help to the salary cap. John Michael Schmitz, look, and I'll say this about all three picks. All three of those were graded first round type talents, at least maybe towards the end of the first round. So he's drafting three guys that are going to start. He's drafting three guys that all, by many accounts, were first round type talents. If you had told me before the draft that we were going to not only get Banks, get one of the top two, if not the top centers in the draft, I'm like, man, what are you smoking or drinking, or are you doing both? There is no way. That's it. That's impossible. For him to be patient, for him to be aggressive and trade up one spot to get Banks, just to make sure he got him, and not what happened, years ago when the Giants got leapfrogged by the Bears and Tennessee to get the two players, and then we were stuck with Eli Apple. And then with John Michael Schmitz to get a center who reminds a lot of people of Bart Oates. And you and I watched the Giants in the 80s, and we remember the great Bart Oates
Yeah.
who helped us win those first Super Bowls. That first Super Bowl. Listen, this is a guy that not only should be with us for one contract, but at a minimum two. I mean, this is just a bulldog in the middle. And you've heard me say this over and over, a force multiplier. Now, it can really let the guards that we have battle it out. May the best man win. You got a guy that Daniel can get to know his snap. Daniel has had a different center snapping him the ball every year of his career. That's rough. Nobody talks about that. There's a relationship there, a physical relationship, like understanding how he likes the ball snapped, the time. So super excited. And Jalen Hyatt, 6 foot 176, but he said in an interview the other day he wants to play at 190 and he doesn't think he's going to lose any of his speed. He was a Blitnikoff winner, best receiver in football. You talked about his stats against Alabama, Georgia. This guy is not just 4'4", but he's like legit. And Joe Shane talked about it when he went to see him. He ended up being on the field because he arrived at the Alabama game late. And he's like, you could feel his speed on the field. Like he said that.
Yeah.
So now it's not just Slayton, but we got another guy who's going to take the top off the defense. Just super exciting. Eric Gray is essentially a mini Saquon. I know some people were a little disappointed. A lot of draft gurus had him rated as maybe the 10th best running back in the draft, but they were still a little worried because they're like, well, we want to change a pace. Kind of like the way Brandon Jacobs was a change of pace for Tiki, and then him and Ahmad played off each other. Look, we don't even know if Saquon's going to be here after this year. I think he's like 5'10", 207. He's basically the same type of runner as Saquon, plants his foot, goes through the hole, like last year Saquon, not Saquon his first couple years where he danced a lot. He's got big, thick, funk legs for his size. But what I found interesting is they say a lot of the draft gurus said he's in all likelihood a better receiver even than Saquon. So does he have the breakaway speed? He doesn't even have a second gear. That's the only problem. He's going to that hole and get you 7 to 10 yards. I'm okay with that. But what he's also going to do is he's going to be an even better receiver on third down. So this is a guy that can play, bottom line, three down. You have a three down back. We don't know what's going to happen with Saquon. He's only played one full season healthy. Let's see now what we can do when we actually have a guy that can spell Saquon and let him sit, and give another guy 10 to 15 carries a game. I'm excited. Trey Hawkins had visits with multiple teams, the Raiders, the Giants, and the Colts. He has the ideal size, like you said, 6'3", 195. But what really started to draw attention of teams apparently is he wasn't invited to the combine, right? Played at Old Dominion. You're not going to get a lot of pub playing for that school. And apparently he put on a show at his pro day. He ran a 4.39. He would have been in the top 10 of all cornerbacks at the combine. He's very physical. You know the old saying, you can never have too many corners. I was a little miffed because, and we'll get to this, well, I'll just say it. The only position I really wanted them to draft that they didn't was an edge player, because Wink is so good at developing them. And I really felt going into the draft, we needed that third. But it turns out they're very, very, very high on Timon Fox. And Ellison Smith, they still feel they may get somebody on. So you know what? Take another corner at a position where we can use some depth, create some competition, maybe not have to keep some of these older veterans who cost a little bit more on the veteran contracts. But he's going to help our specials. This is a guy that's physical and plays specials and plays them well. Lastly, it's a very similar thought. Jordan Riley, I think, is a run stuffer. They said it's hard to find guys 6'5", 338 walking around the earth, and he's never gonna get you a couple sacks. He's that guy that can be a backup defensive tackle to help spell Dexter and make sure we're plugging that run defense right, because we had problems this season. The last one, Javarius Owens, he's actually someone that I think is you should be excited about. He lasted 2 regimes at Houston, and that's very unusual for a player to last through 2 coaching changes. If they don't like him, and look, Houston was borderline playoffs. Houston is not a terrible, terrible program. They are capable of attracting college talent. So for this kid to stick around through 2 coaching changes, 2 coaching regimes in his career, and not hit that transfer portal that everybody so easily, just hit the transfer portal. There's a reason he stayed, but there's a reason the coaching staff's kept him. He's physical. He's also good at playing on specials. And he's kind of like a poor man's Julian Love. He's somebody that could maybe be a roamer. So what does Wink and Jerome, their defensive back coordinator, do so well? Put them in a position to succeed. Maybe he's not a good cover. Maybe he's not great with tight ends. Well, how can we use him? So I like what they're doing. They're creating some young, physical, athletic, skilled depth with traits in that backfield. And look what they did with the guys they picked up last season. Listen, aside from Bill Belichick, he's the guru of defensive backs. How many years now has he taken a defensive back in the draft? We don't even know that well. And literally within 3 years is the best corner in all of football. I mean, we can name a couple guys he's done that with. He's the guru. But as Wink likes to say, in terms of actual defensive backs coaches, he feels the Giants have the best DB coach in all of football. So that's a strength of the team. So my final thought is draft into also what's a coaching strength of the team. You're going to take guys in the 6th and 7th round who have traits and can be developed, do it in the positions where we're going to coach the hell out of them.
Yeah, I agree. And that was a great analogy. And you actually touched on something I was going to ask you. If you were disappointed that they didn't get an edge. We had discussed that, prior to the draft, and even draft night, we were kicking the tires on it, and it didn't seem to come to them that way. Were you disappointed, or, did the picks that they made kind of temper that for you?
Let me tell you something super, super exciting that everyone who's listening or watching should be insanely excited about. And it speaks to not just, maybe they paid the most. It speaks to the fact that they're attracting young, undrafted players who say, you know what? That's an offensive coordinator I want to learn under. That's a defensive coaching staff that I know I can be developed. I went on to ESPN, which is not the end all be all. There's drafttech.com. Listen, we all know there's tons and tons of draft experts out there and scouting reports. But if anybody goes onto ESPN.com during the draft, what do they often do? It's like best player available, and you can also look at best player available by position at a given point in the draft. So if your team is about to draft, it's like, oh, I wonder who the best players are, according to Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. And it's just two men's opinions. They got a wide receiver out of West Virginia, and they got an edge player. I'm trying to remember where he was. And he has a tough to pronounce name, so forgive me. I don't have his info in front of me. Every team is trying to sign UDFAs. And for those of you who aren't sure, it's undrafted free agents, right? So sometimes you don't want to be drafted in the 7th round. Sometimes, as the saying goes, you kind of want to, at that point, you might as well not get drafted. So that way you can control where you go. Listen, they shelled out, I think, $275,000 for the wide receiver out of West Virginia. The kid who's like runs a 4.3. He's 6'4". He's insane. But there were issues, not character issues, but just some issues with him in his skill set. And so that's why he didn't get drafted. They signed for, I think, $275,000, which is basically a full season's worth of if he played on the practice squad.
Right.
Basically give him all that money up front. That's how he was the very next wide receiver on that list. And according to McShay and Kiper, he should have gone in the 5th or 6th round. He just ended up dropping. And the same thing with the edge player, who's, again, forgive me, I'll do a better job. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head. Those two guys were at the top of the quote unquote best available players list. The Giants got them. They signed them both, along with a bunch of other guys, undrafted free agents. So I think, and there's a lot of people that were very high on him. I think he was the other player, aside from Kalijah Kancey, he was the other guy who entered the draft from that defensive line, and people were very high on him. So to answer your question, I was disappointed, but you know what? If they can get a UDFA who they can develop and put him on the practice squad, we've already seen what they've been able to do developing players. There's still going to be, they call it a second round of free agency, right? Now that they have these rookies in for minicamp, there's going to be players in the next month or two that are going to get cut from other teams.
Right.
So they could always sign one of those. So you know what? Listen, for them to get starters potentially at 3 really key positions that were all positions of need, if the sacrifice is not getting an edge in the top 5 or 6 rounds or whatever, it's not ideal. But if that's what we have to miss out on, so be it. I'll do that knowing that we got players at these other positions. And I am really, really happy. My other 2 areas of like second level priority were backup running back, because we just don't know with Saquon. And even if he's there, like, will he stay healthy whole season? Our backup running backs, I know you like Breida, and Breida was okay. I was a little disappointed in Breida. Gary Brightwell doesn't do the job. We liked the kid out of Rutgers last year, the undrafted free agent, but who knows? We needed a legit running back, and I wanted to see another D tackle. We had Davidson in the draft last year. Go get another one. If the guy is talented and good, at least. So they did address those 2 needs. I would have liked an edge, but how did you feel?
So, like I said to you, I had my eye on it, but every time they made a pick, I was like, wow, you could see them putting this puzzle together. And I would kind of take a step back and say, ooh, I get that. So, but so far their UDFAs are what? Deontay Johnson, linebacker out of Toledo. Alex Cook,
who's good.
Yes. Alex,
he's a good player.
Safety out of Washington. Tommy DeVito, the quarterback out of Illinois. So there's your 3rd string quarterback.
Yeah, Don Bosco Prep, New Jersey.
Yep. I remember him when I lived in New Jersey. You've got West Virginia wide receiver Bryce Ford Wheaton.
That's the wide receiver.
And then the edge is Habuku Baldonado out of Pitt.
That's the one.
Yes. So, so they did address it. They addressed it after the draft. But, again, I'm pleased with their overall draft. So I was kind of like, okay, let's keep this going here. He's got a plan, and as I always put out on Twitter, in Shane we trust. So I don't question him. As the draft went on, I kept saying, "Where's the edge? Where's the edge? Where's the edge?" But then they would pick, and I'd say, "All right, that's good. All right, I'll work with that."
Dude, they love Timon Fox.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. So again, who am I to say that they're wrong?
Yeah.
You know, and look, in a very small sample size, he didn't actually play badly last year from what we saw.
No,
So
not at all.
let's give him a shot. Um, you got to bear with me, Steve. I've got a fly in here that's just dive bombing me. So if you see me waving, I'm not waving you off. Um, so back to the draft. So grading the draft. So this is something that I had to separate Carl the fan from Carl, Giant Zone guy analyzing the draft. Um, it was easy for me to say A, and I'm bordering that A-B line. All right. And I know maybe I sound biased, but okay, so I love the value. The first three picks to me made the draft. Okay. Um, and you can even go a little bit beyond that, but the first three picks for sure made this draft a home run for me. What we're and maybe everybody doesn't consider them an A, but all right, so Jalen Hyatt was the 5th rated receiver in the draft. They got him in the 3rd round. Jonathan Michael Schmitz was the best center in the draft. Many thought he may go in the 1st round. And the Jets did us a favor by taking Tippmann instead of him. So we got the best draft center in the draft. Deonte Banks, we probably got one of the top 3 cornerbacks in the draft. But what also kind of pushes this towards an A for me is the way the Giants handled the draft. The way Shane was aggressive, the way they approached it, the way they didn't overplay their hand. They let the draft come to them. They made moves when they felt they needed to make moves. So you couple that with the top 3 picks and then the depth behind it and what I consider quality depth. I don't want to say A plus because I think I'm overreaching there, but I'll give them a soft A minus.
It's so funny. Without doing any math, if you will, and listen, everybody sees my moniker. I'm the banker. I mean, I'm good at math. I was just eyeballing the draft. I'm like, oh, that's a solid A. And the only thing holding me back from giving it an A plus was if they had an edge. If they had an edge in there, I'm like, oh my God, throw my hands up. That's, you know, the time will tell 3, 4 years down the road if this was a great draft. We all know how it works. But today, I was like, wow, that would be an A plus. So I'll just give it an A. And then I went through and I literally gave each one a score like we were grading a high school test, right? I just said 100, 100, 100 for all 3 first picks. Then I gave round 5 a 90. I was like, you know what? I think it's a great pick. Could it have been better? Yeah, I could go back and find other players that were there, a different running back, maybe whatever. I gave Trey Hawkins a 90. I didn't know a ton about him, obviously. I didn't even know a lot about him. But as I learned more, I was like, you know what? That's a solid pick. Round 7, I gave him a 75. Jordan Riley fills a need. He's definitely got skill as a run stopper. He's played into multiple programs. But by all accounts, according to the scouting reports and what they said about him, he's got size, he's got athleticism, but not the type of athleticism he's going to push the pocket or get it, whatever. He fills a need in round 7. Come on. And then the second pick in Darius Owens, I gave an 80. I actually gave a little bit of a higher score because I thought, all right, it's not an A. But in round 7, beggars can't be choosers. And I mean, we already talked about what I thought of him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I added it up and I just did the simple math and it came out to the low 9. That's an A minus. So that's where I sit. I'm like, you know what? I'll give it an A minus. And then I listened to Kuiper and McShay and they did the same thing. And I was like, oh, how about that? They gave it an A minus. So I'm with you.
Interesting. So
Yeah.
let's we got a little bit of time here. So now that the draft is over, Steve, how do you see future construction of this roster now going forward?
So as So I'm glad you asked that. So as excited as we were last season at the job they did after all the injuries in August and September, they had more uh, signings than any other team in the NFL from other teams' practice squads and street free agents. But while those gymnastics and then the ability to coach those guys up and get them acclimated and assimilated and get the best out of them are insane, you don't want them to have to do that every year, right? That's not a good sign when the team is doing it. And they've replaced the turf. So hopefully, if that was the issue, who knows? Um, but what also comes along with that is maybe you're signing them for veteran minimums. Maybe it's costing you a little bit more. You lose flexibility now because you still have injured players you're paying, and now you're paying additional guys. So my hope is that two things. One, by and I talked about this at the top of the show with the cornerback one and Banks, if he fills that need, now you're getting guys, Jalen Hyatt, he's one of our top 3 wide receivers. These are positions that if you were to try to replace them in free agency and go out and sign them are very, very expensive. So it's giving them two things. It's helping them with roster construction, not just this year, but over the next 2, 3, 4 years. So if they do project and they re-sign Andrew Thomas, Xavier McKinney, all these great Dexter Lawrence, obviously, hopefully it gets done soon, very soon. These great young players, the foundations of our team, it gives them that flexibility to not be like, oh, now we don't have enough money to do all. So it's going to give them roster flexibility. And it's also going to obviously not necessitate, if they assuming they stay healthy, and hopefully knock on wood they do, it's going to mean they don't have to go out and sign additional players at those same positions, because now you've filled it with guys who are high performing and are getting playing time. So I'm excited because I don't just think this helps the team today. This is something that's going to help the team in 2, 3, 4 years from now. And isn't that what the great teams do? They draft well, they develop well, and they're not always begging. They're not out there, as Shane says, shopping hungry. They're developing players. And then if you don't sign them to a second contract and they walk, then you get high comp picks, which we all know the benefit of that. So,
right. To your point, what I like about what he's done so far to this point is that I don't think we're going to find ourselves in the position this year like we were last year, scouting the waiver wire on cut down day, going crazy to draft someone else's scraps to be our starter and give us quality time. So I like that. What I like is that you can see, and I used this reference before, he's putting this puzzle together. All right. He inherited Andrew Thomas. He drafted Evan Neal. Now you got Schmitz a center. All right. So you could see the offensive line coming together. Our wide receiver group still not great, but so what did Shane go out and do? Okay, well, I don't like the free agent wide receivers. Well, I'm going to go out and get Darren Waller. And essentially, he's going to be a 1-year rental. Either stay healthy and we'll resign you, or you're done. All right. I made a reference about Jalen Hyatt. Even if he doesn't turn out to be Plaxico Burress, okay, and I'm just throwing names out there for Giant fans, but this guy's going to get on the field. He's going to get recognition. All right. He's going to open up the field. He's going to spread the field. So these little slot receivers that we have now, they're going to have more room. Saquon's going to have more room. So you could see what they're trying to implement here. So I don't see any panic moves like Gettleman with Kadarius Toney, and you could see the thought and the rationale behind what he's doing. And to your point, he's building for the future. He's building this organization for the long term, which is, so exciting. And again, Steve, we have hope. It just feels like they're doing it the right way, which is, I'm not going to question any of these guys' moves right now. The results bear it out that these guys know what to do. So those are my final thoughts there. But before we wrap up, we have our Don't Be Surprised segment. And I have to admit that I swung and missed because I said, don't be surprised if Saquon Barkley is not a Giant after the draft is over. And I own it. I was wrong, and I admit it. So I've got two tonight that I hope I'm right on. So number one, I'm going to say don't be surprised if Daniel Jones is a top 10 quarterback this year. Okay, and that's a weak one, but hell, it's an improvement, and that means we're still going in the right direction. But my other don't be surprised based on a draft review show is don't be surprised if Trey Hawkins is a regular in the cornerback defensive rotation this year. Maybe not from opening day, but I think very early into the season, Trey Hawkins out of Old Dominion is going to be a regular on that defense. What do you have?
So I got one. Don't be surprised. Don't be surprised. And I think the most likely position is wide receiver. Expect at least one veteran or maybe even two to be traded. We have way too many bodies at wide receiver. It's a good problem to have. He went out and signed a lot of guys to one-year contracts. We have a couple guys injured. Shep, Wandell, Colin Johnson's coming back from an injury. There's a lot of potential players in that group, but Jamison Crowder finally had one good year. They brought him in on a one-year contract. He's got talent. He can also return on specials. He can do returns, I think punt returns. But the bottom line is they can't keep all those receivers. And now you got Jalen Hyatt. They drafted in the third round. He's going to play. We still got Slayton. They brought Slayton back on a 2-year contract. We got Isaiah Hodgins. I mean, I can keep going on. We have a lot of guys in that wide receiver room. And I think if like a Colin Johnson comes back or some of these other guys, we just signed Wheaton, the undrafted free agent that we're so high on. And you can only put so many guys on the practice squad. So I think there's a potential for him to trade. And I think what's going to motivate him as well is he doesn't have extra picks next year. We all have seen now how Shane likes to have that extra currency. Those extra picks allows him to move up, whatever, does what he wants. Package picks, move down, move back up. Next year is already looking to be a phenomenal draft, especially at the quarterback position. So there might be a lot of movement. He likes to wheel and deal. He called him, poker face. We're not going to get, it looks like, any comp picks because we signed more free agents than we lost, unlike the year before. So yeah, I think that's a position of strength, and that's probably the one that might be most likely. So don't be surprised if he trades a player, creates some extra cap space. A lot of these guys are making $1 million or more a year, and pick up some extra picks.
So you say that like you've got your eyes on someone that may be on the trade block or may go. Do you have anybody that you think may, in particular, that may go?
That's what's crazy about it. Let's see how summer camp plays out. I mean, even like a guy like Shane Lemieux, who's still on his rookie contract, he's going to be making over $1 million against the salary cap with very, very, very little dead money. I think it's 80 grand dead money or whatever. They can cut him.
Yeah.
They could trade. There's a couple of guys on the roster. Listen, we're last in the NFL right now in salary cap space. And everybody knows you go to Spotrac and it's fluid, right? It seems like on a day-to-day, if not week-to-week, it's constantly the teams are moving up and down based upon signings. They need money for their rookie pool. They need money to sign potential free agents if unfortunately guys get hurt. We all know you got to go into the season with at least $3 or $4 million in play money just in case something happens. We saw that happen last year. So there's a bunch of guys that they can, what I would call, blend and extend. They can take some of their current salary, give it as a roster bonus, and extend their contract. It's not necessarily even the biggest names. And then there's some guys that they can trade or cut, and that'll save them $1 million, $2 million. Darnay Holmes is making a couple $1 million this year. But you know what? If Aaron Robinson comes back and ends up being our slot, which quite frankly, that's what he played in college at UCF. That's his strength. That's what he's good at. He just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Maybe you can even put Cordell Flott in slot a little bit instead of on the boundary. I'm just saying they have options. They also signed a couple guys in free agency. You get rid of Darnay Holmes. You get rid of a couple other guys because Shane and his staff have finally restocked the shelves. Again, we've now had what might be another nice draft. Let the competition play out in summer camp, and maybe they trade a couple guys, and they might even cut a few that we don't expect. And there may be a tremendous amount of salary cap space they create just by doing that. And like I said, I think he wants more picks for next year. He seems to really like his picks.
So I'm going to ask you one last question before we wrap this up, because you brought up a name that just every time I hear the name, it just twists my shorts. But
Or at Elflock.
you know my
I
feelings.
like him.
Look, I have
I
nothing
like him.
personal against the guy. I just don't like him on the field. Do you think there's any chance he's not on this roster opening day?
No way. No way.
Okay. All right. I asked.
He's young. He's cheap. He won a national championship. He's versatile. He could play multiple positions. That's and he's an
And they
ascending
drafted
player.
him.
And he's an ascending player, meaning, yeah, you know what, he made a mistake, but how many mistakes did you make when you were 21, 22? He's a kid that made some mistakes, but then at the end of the season, we saw him make some phenomenal plays when they finally trust him enough to get back on the field. He's got size. He doesn't have bulk. He's not heavy enough, but he's tall. He's lean. He's lanky. He's athletic. He has quick recovery speed. He has fluid hips. Listen, and to your point, they drafted him. So why would you get rid of a guy like that?
Because I don't like him.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I tried. Anyway, look, Steve, always a pleasure. I look forward to doing this with you every night. So,
Same
great
here,
job.
brother.
Good job on the research. Great breaking down this draft. And
You too. You too.
yeah, let's keep this going. And everybody, thank you again for tuning in and following us and supporting us. And we hope you still enjoy the show. And we look forward to bringing you more. So thank you. And everybody have a good night. Steve, have a good night, brother.
You too.
Thanks, man.